Everyone, this is Kevin England with a short introduction to the video before we get started. This is an episode of the Beekeepers Corner podcast, episode number 93, shot April 10th, 2016. The episode name is Rojo. It's an interview with J. David Waldman at Rojo's Coffee Roastery in Lambertville, New Jersey. David is a first-year beekeeper, just finishing his first year, and we wanted to have a sit-down with him and talk about his experiences. Hope you enjoy the video. So David, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, Kevin.
I am really excited to get a chance to interview you.
Myself,
This has been a conversation in months, I think, terms. When
It
you
has.
and I met, I had mentioned to you that I wanted to do this, and I'm really, really happy that we're going to get the chance to talk here. So
I'm delighted. We're both busy, so thank you.
Do you want to try this too?
I'm
I
sure.
brought an extra cup.
Why not?
Thank you. Sorry. This is
Sorry.
totally unplanned.
No, that's okay. And so that's a good opening, Dave.
sorry.
Where are we? Why
We are at one of our shops. This is Rojo's Roastery in Lambertville.
Yeah.
We're in our 11th year. It's a coffee roastery and a cafe.
Nice.
And that was Matt serving us some really unusual, what promises to be unusual coffee that a customer brought us back from Colombia a couple days ago.
Oh, very nice.
So the other part of my life when I'm not playing with bees is playing with coffee.
And I know you were just telling us at our last meeting that you just came back from a trip. You were overseas.
Yeah, I did 2 trips back to back, one in Ethiopia for coffee exploration to try to find some new, small, independent, extremely high quality farms. We're always looking for better and better. And then a USAID project as a diplomat of one of 7 coffee professionals appointed by the U.S. Ambassador Derek Mitchell to Myanmar, Burma. Now that Myanmar promises to be democratic with Aung San Suu Kyi implementing the democracy as we speak, we were given diplomatic freedom, unprecedented, to go to some of the remote northern parts of the country and work with farmers to improve the coffee quality. I have a certified palate for coffee, which would translate into higher export and export dollars, something that would be a totally new undertaking for Burma, for Myanmar.
Yeah, very similar to the conversations I had Tim Schuler on the podcast talking about Malawi and helping them improve their beekeeping practices there. And,
Same idea, yeah.
So the reason I wanted to talk to you was that you're a first-year beekeeper. You
I
have
am.
your first year under your belt.
And I'm happy to say, using Tim Schuler's words rather than a bee haver, I'm a beekeeper.
Beekeeper, yeah.
I mean, literally our 2 hives overwintered successfully.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I'm sorry, I interrupted, yeah.
No, that's okay. No,
It's
look,
exciting,
this is going to be a great dialogue because I have so much to talk to you about. What piqued my interest to talk to you was that I knew right out of the gate, 1, you're passionate about all the things that you do, and 2, you had an unorthodox thought and style and research or whatever on how you wanted to approach that. And we're going to explore that in this conversation. But first, as a new beekeeper, where did you get started? How did you learn? Where did you find the catalogs, buy your equipment? Take me through the absolute beginning of, I'm going to be a beekeeper, what do I do first?
Yeah, it's a funny story. My wife, Jeannie, and I have been married for 38 years. And a birthday present she bought me way back when was a correspondence course from Penn State on beekeeping.
Oh, I didn't even know they had those.
Yeah, it was. I think Penn State is still pretty front and forward on bee technology. I filed it away and never found the time to do it, but always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to beekeep. So I went onto the Rutgers website after talking to some locals in Hopewell Borough, where we live, where there actually are probably 6 or 8 beekeepers, some of them backyards, some of them more in the township on farms. And they mentioned and recommended strongly that I take the introductory beekeeping course that at the time, it winds up it was the last year they did it, was Bob Hughes and Tim Schuler, the state apiarist, teaching. It was a 3 or 3.5 day course, hands-on with lots of handouts. And I tried to take the course 2 years ago. The class was sold out.
Yeah, it's tough to get into that.
It fills out. So then I got on the waiting list. This was April 2014. And I got so excited, I got a little bit ahead of myself and was calling around to try to get some bees, not realizing that everything's promised out, from the December before.
Yeah.
So long story short, I waited out that year, signed up for the course in October, November at Rutgers. And in the meantime, to answer your question, I started digging pretty deep into the research, both on the internet and through WICWAS, which is one of the beekeeping
WICWAS
press, and Bee Culture, and the bee magazines, and immediately started subscribing to both of them and trying to read them cover to cover.
Yeah.
As you said, and it's true, if I'm going to do something, I do it. I dig in and I jump in, and it's with passion and curiosity. So I basically, is it okay to mention brand names and stuff like that?
Yeah, but I don't receive any sponsors, so I don't, try not to disparage anybody, but by any means mention. I was going to ask you, whose stuff did you buy?
Yeah.
What equipment?
So, long story short, I started building up a library and started reading voraciously. I have a background and an interest, my wife and I, in organic gardening from our years in Nashville when I was a musician, which we can talk about later. So I got a Michael Bush book, I got the Dayton book, the ABC book, I got some of the tomes for beekeeping, and then I started branching out. And then
I picture you up late at night.
Oh, yeah. Nodding at it, the computer, doing research, and one thing leading to another. And I've got notebooks. I take copious notes, and I'm never afraid to go to the thought leaders. My formula for how I like to do things is to do research, dig in deep, assimilate the knowledge, and then figure out who the thought leaders are, and then contact them. They'll either have time for me or they won't.
Right.
So I started talking to Michael Bush. I started talking to Randy Oliver, who is probably, if I had to pick one single most important person that keeps my head straight, he's the guy. He's a prolific online publisher, and he does really thoughtful scientific stuff, but he has results that you can digest and act on.
Yep.
And then I started getting the Seeley book and the Winston book, and I started doing research on some of the older books that are out of print and started looking for them in used books. And before you know it, you got a library, you got magazines, your head is spinning, and you read about residual miticides in foundation and commercial beekeepers over medicating with terramycin and with fumagillin and with all of the amitraz and whatever, and you read about the history of how that's led to resistance among the varroa mites. It really becomes, in a nutshell, a study of how are you going to deal with mites, which as recently as 2 months ago hit the last territory in the world, New Zealand. That was the only place left that didn't have. Now they're there. At the Rutgers course, which was amazing, they hand out catalogs from Brushy Mountain and Kelly and Better Bee. And I'm a catalog freak. I love looking at catalogs. So that was how I started learning about the equipment. And then
when I was a kid, I remember the Sears catalog.
Yeah.
It was like Christmas when that thing came. What was I going to get? To cut the racetracks and whatever. To me, when the bee catalogs arrive, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I start looking through.
It's like Steve Martin. You're too young, but like when in the Steve Martin movie, when the phone book comes out.
I do remember that.
So I love when the new catalogs come out. So I educated myself, between the books and the catalogs. And then I started asking people around what quality you like. And then I joined your chapter, the Northwest chapter, and started going to meetings. and started learning about the differences between manufacturers and the dimensional discrepancies.
Yeah, you came in right about the time we did the frame game, right?
Yeah, the frame game, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I started devouring all of the really rich information on the chapter website. And then I started buying stuff. I've got a modest cabinet shop in my basement at home. I was a cabinet maker professionally some years back, and was hoping to use cypress if I could, because I wasn't fond of using paint. But as I found out, the Kelly are the people that make the cypress ones, and their dimensions are not completely all square with the brushy mountain, and I tend to prefer the brushy mountain quality. I'm not afraid to pay a little bit more for better quality.
I use brushy mountain stuff too.
I just think it's good,
I
solid
don't know
stuff.
why. I've just looked around, and I think one day I just said I need to center on somebody. I do like Kelly stuff also. I like all of them, honestly, but for some reason it was just I picked Brushy Mountain. I went and looked at their website. That was another factor, is like how easy to find the information.
Exactly. So to answer that question, probably 90% of what I use is Brushy Mountain. The exceptions are if I'm looking for a cypress box, they don't offer them, so I get them from Kelly. And then the other thing is my unorthodox initial approach. All the reading I did and the emails back and forth with people like Randy Oliver and Michael Bush, and trying to sort through a predisposition of natural people to not want to treat, which I decided was unrealistic and probably impossible.
Yeah.
I tried to figure out what's the best approach to be practical and to do everything you could to ensure survival. And the theory and the observation that I developed after going to meetings and meeting other beekeepers in the area was that beekeeping is sort of a metaphor. It's like a lifestyle. You bring with you the way you are. If you're sloppy, if you're organized, if you're curious, if you're just tell me how to do it, I don't want to get to, you take all that
You've
with you.
noticed that, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people bring that with them, and that becomes your framework for what kind of beekeeper you are. And I'm not
That's
making
a great
judgment
observation.
calls.
You know
but-
what's funny? I've never.
Yeah.
I have that in the back of my mind, but as you articulated, it is so true, right? As the president of the Beekeepers Association, I meet people of all walks, and that's what made you stand out. You were there as a first-time beekeeper. You didn't even have bees yet. You asked the most important and interesting questions, like, I don't want to use foundation. How do I get started? That was what I remember one of your questions, right?
And I was
wanna
nervous.
do this.
I was nervous about it because there aren't that many people around that do it. What I seem to observe was there tends to be localized practices. For example, here in New Jersey, where everybo's doing two deeps and everybody's doing either the plastic foundation or the wax foundation crimp wire.
Yep.
And there's a lot of followers and a lot of, and I kind of felt like I have nothing to lose here. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing it for fun and because I think pollination is important, which delights me to no end that Obama's pollination policy came out last year.
Yeah.
And that's having some positive effect. But in any event, everything I absorbed about residual miticides and cleanliness of wax led me to want to do foundationless, with all the caveats. If it's not straight, you'll get wonky cross comb.
That was the conversation I remember you and I having. Like, you can try this. This was I'll replay the conversation, see if it rings a bell with you.
Sure.
You could try this. I'm all for it. It's fine. However, you're going to start with bees, and you're going to get to June. And if you have wonky comb and you have to get them started, it is really difficult during the dearth to get them to build straight comb in time for you to get to winter.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. I deal with so many beekeepers. Did you start with packages or nukes?
Nukes.
Nukes.
George
Okay.
Schaefer, nukes. Again, based on my reading, I was convinced that even though you'd wait another 3 to 4 weeks later on in the season, that there were significant justifiable benefits to waiting so you could get an integrated family. as opposed to having somebody weigh out a bunch of bees, dump a queen in a box, and it's like, oh well, whatever. Like here, you have productive brood, you have developed comb, you've got anywhere from 3, 4, or 5 deep frames, depending on how they sell them. And you're off and
he
running.
sells 5-frame nukes, right? So you had 5s?
I think they were 4.
Oh, yeah?
I'm trying to remember. I think they might have been 4s.
Okay.
And so I took delivery May 17th last year, after everybody sometime around the 10th or 15th of April had their packages going. And I was going like, oh my God, everybody's already like, this is never going to happen. And then you read all the myths and all the misinformation and the highly opinionated misinformation.
Yes, there's a lot of opinions out there.
Yeah, and it's a question of don't do foundationless because it takes too long, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, or put in a popsicle stick or don't put in a popsicle stick, or paint it with wax, or string it, or use bamboo skewers. Your head is spinning with everybody's opinion of the way to be successful in foundationless.
So stop for a second and tell us about your operation, right?
So my operation...
Tell me about your yard and your benches and your hives and how you set things up.
So in my typical way, where I do stuff, I kind of do stuff for the long haul, and I like quality, and I like to, for whatever I do, to have been thoughtful about what I'm trying to do. I'm not one to cut corners. So we have almost an acre lot right in the borough of Hopewell. We've been there 32 years.
You're right in the middle of town.
We're right
have
in
neighbors
town.
on both sides.
Yeah.
You're on a town street, basically.
We're surrounded by, it's a village designated town. It's just under 2,000 people, maybe 680 homes. And we're on a street with just house after house after house. So we had fencing that pre-existed. We had good southern exposure. We had a backyard that was set back from the neighbor, far away from any neighbor's houses, far away from the sidewalk of the back street, because our property backs on another street. We have 2 streets on our property. So we didn't want to be close to the school kids, or we didn't want anybody to freak out if it was in their flight path. So we have good exposure. The fence was up to block the northern wind. I had done all my homework from the handouts from Tim Schuler's course, read the best practices piece on municipal beekeeping in terms of let your neighbors know, giving them a bottle of honey every year does wonders, talking to them about it, having it not be close to, all the, what I think is common sense ways to do it. I didn't tell my neighbors that I was doing it. I have one particular neighbor who I'm concerned about, who, if that person knew about it, they would have caused a stink, even though it might not have presented any kind of a nuisance whatsoever. And she's someone who typically doesn't leave her house. She sits around a lot in the house. So my risk evaluation was she's not even going to know I have bees because she's never out in the yard. She doesn't have a garden. On that basis, I didn't say it. On the basis of my other neighbors, they are so excited. I get notes and emails from them.
Nice.
Your bees are watering in our bird bath, and we're adding another bird bath because
that's the kind of neighbor I want.
Yeah, so it's amazing.
That's great.
And I kept telling them, I said, we won't have any honey this year because you give them all the honey you make to overwinter them, but when we harvest next year, I can't wait to give you our local honey, and they're so excited. So in general, it's really nice. So I excavated down into the soil. I drove out a couple hours to a place in Pennsylvania that has cypress 4x4 posts because I didn't want to use any treated lumber of any kind for off-gassing purposes or for whatever toxins there might be. Then I dug the holes. I put in 3 stands, so it's 4 posts per stand, with a horizontal piece to put the colony on. and they're all facing south. Each one's a little bit different angle in case I need to do any equalization or if just to play with them. And it wound up that the box on the left was hive number 1, the box on the right was hive number 2, and I have a center box unused that's my prep area where I can stage whatever work I'm doing in either of the hives.
Like a little bench almost.
Yeah, it's a bench. And then I have benches on the side as well, but I use that as my staging bench for inspections or for adding something or for doing, whatever needs to be done. And it's gravel, and we've got watering containers across the way, maybe 50 feet away, and they love it. They obviously find the water.
Yeah.
Our neighbor had a pool at the time, but they took the pool out. It was an above-ground pool. The kids are grown, so they decommissioned that. So the importance of water is really big
Well,
now.
also, we shot a short video at your place.
Right.
I've seen your
Yeah,
operation, but I
yeah.
wanted everybody to have a sense of what it was like. And you have a dog bowl with
Yeah.
stones in it that you fill the water.
Exactly.
And I thought what was really neat is that you keep the water containers outside to fill that so that it's ambient temperature, and you just pour it in and
Yeah.
you have them on hand.
Exactly.
Yeah, and your borough is surrounded by the township, which is a little more open space. There's
Oh, yeah.
farms and forests and things
We're
like that.
surrounded
So
by
you're a flight
green
path.
acres. Yeah. Our flight path back to the St. Michael's or to the park, it's amazing.
Yeah, you have
There's
a
very
pretty-
few people using green lawn chemicals. We're out of range of the flight path, 2.5 miles from any golf course.
Yeah.
So I don't worry too much. I've registered with an APS number, so if somebody's going to be doing something technically, they need to contact me if they're going to spray any kind of pesticide.
Yeah.
But I feel like things are good in terms of foraging capability. There's tulip poplars, red maples.
Yeah.
There's everything you can
There's,
imagine.
as I drive through Hopewell on the way home.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as I look at the flowering trees right now, the borough is just beautiful. There's so many people who have planted diverse trees on all the streets and so on that there's an abundance of forage. And I don't think you have a lot of competition in there for, there's not a high pressure of, there's not some commercial operator somewhere nearby and other things. So I think you're in a good, you're in a really good place.
I did a little bit of a census word of mouth during the winter and discovered that there's probably 8 keepers in beekeepers in Hopewell.
Yeah.
And sadly, most of them they keep by negligence, so to speak, or by abandonment. So they'll call me and say, I lost my hives, and they'll say, well, what did you do, or can I come and look? And, it's not a level of involvement. But I was talking to Tim Schuler the other day, looking at a neighbor's hives who I'm helping him maintain. He's got 4 hives at his farm in Hopewell. And what concerns me as a new beekeeper is the health of your hives are no better than the health of your neighbor's hives if they've got foul brood or if they've got mites or if they're coming in to do some robbing or absconding. And that's what happened. I think that's my concern because none of my neighbors, we've got 2 on the street, like literally a block away, who don't do any treatment at all, and they've lost all their hives.
I have that in my neighborhood too. If you go within 3 square miles of my property, there's probably 10 beekeepers, and I know some of them lose their bees every year, and I don't know the answer to that other than just, when I see the people on the street, I try to offer guidance and help them out, but it is a frustration. And
you can't
and a
lay
problem.
your religion on them, and they've chosen to make it passive, and they're not. It's more of a hobby where they're not.
Yeah.
And Tim had an interesting comment. He basically said that might be an opportunity for what's the acid that everybody's vaporizing now?
Oxalic?
Yeah, he said that might be an opportunity for oxalic. He said normally he's not a fan at the moment of oxalic acid because it doesn't get into brood.
Yeah.
But in the case of neighbors with bad practices coming into your hive, it'll get them.
Yeah.
So he was saying that might be an interesting application of oxalic acid fuming.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, which I had not thought about. Yeah.
So you started your packages in May.
Started in mid-May. Got Kelly. The one thing I forgot to mention, a hardware item, is there's a wedged V-groove that I think you or Bob had told me about.
I think it's style F frame.
That's
in your
right.
Catalog.
And so I got a bunch of them and built them up, and that's what I use for foundationless. So
Let me ask on those. Did you just you use the top bar and the rails and the bottom?
Yep.
Full frame.
Yep.
Did you talked earlier you could put bamboo and all these things.
And I
Did
later
you do any of
experimented with that.
or-
Yeah. Later on in the year, when I started getting cross combing and some stuff where I had to go like, this is not salvageable, I'm going to cut it out and start again. But I was still determined to see how I would fare with foundationless. I did a couple things. I strung some of the hives. I replaced frames where I'd have 3 nylon, like fishing line monofilament going horizontally. And then I did some with bamboo skewers going vertically. And I've had good success with both of those in terms of cross-combing.
They just build straight down through them, right?
Yeah, and it's not an issue. And I can't speak for extraction because this will be the first summer when I extract, and we'll see if I wind up doing crush and strain.
Did you do those in your honey supers? You started with a nuke, which came with foundation, right?
Right.
Did you replace those frames, or did you leave them in there?
I left them in.
I
left them in and supplemented them with foundationless deeps.
Okay.
And of the foundationless deeps that got wonky, I would replace them with ones with either the monofilament wire or the bamboo.
Yeah.
And the supers, in every case, were foundationless without anything, because at that point they had started building and things were going pretty well. For some reason, the supers seemed to do better for verticality than the deeps.
Yeah.
Maybe because there's more room.
I think
to move or more real estate.
I don't know. This is my speculation. But
Yeah.
when they're building brood comb, they'll build brood comb in any way, shape, or form. But when they're building honey, they typically tend to build that a little bit straighter.
Yeah.
But it's funny is I've been trying to go foundationless, and I have those same frames. What I had said to you, for those listening, is take your nuke, get it centered in the box, let the bees build out, put the outside frames, let them build them out.
Right.
And then spread that nuke apart and be putting frames when the nectar flow is on in between them, so that you have a built frame, and an open frame, and they'll build less wonky in that way, right?
I think that's good
I
advice.
have brushy mountain
Yeah.
frames, and I just put a whole bunch of them together last year and put them in my hives. This year I ordered all Kelly, but the full frame. I use those Kelly frames, the F frames, but just the top bar in my top bar. And this year what I'm doing is
Literally
buying the
no
full
sides
frame,
or anything?
no sides in my top bar.
Like a top bar, yeah.
Right? And this year what I'm doing is I want to switch to foundationless like you. So I'm curious about the rods versus the
Right.
fishing wire or whatever you used. Which one was better? I've heard Roger Gares, he talked about recently, he was at that last meeting where he talked about he put the dowel down through, and that worked out really well.
Yeah, I bought a box of bamboo skewers from like a restaurant supply.
Yeah.
And then drilled little holes in the top and bottom, cut the bamboo skewer with a pair of wire cutters, oversized, so you bend it in and then it straightens out inside the hole.
Does it go through the top and the bottom? And did you glue them?
No. I only drilled the holes part way through.
Oh, okay. I see. You put them in.
So
like
you'd have to
bed
force
them
them
pop
in.
them in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to have to deal with them falling out from drilling all the way through. So I drilled them maybe halfway in.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
But did you have them? I bought the frames built, so I'm out of luck.
Yeah, I always build my frames myself. Yeah. So it's a lot easier to do that drilling unassembled, obviously. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm mining gold here. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do it, because this is what I have in
Well, you should
store.
come and look. I mean, I haven't fully opened everything up to see what's going on, but it'd be nice to figure out if the horizontal fishing monofilament does better than the bamboo.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah,
to
I
take a
suspect
look at
it's
that.
more function, as you say, if you're alternating it with traditional stuff so they don't have too much room to go crazy.
Yeah.
Because if you have 3 foundationless in a row, this has happened to me, you get 2 of them that are 1.
Yes.
And it's like a unibody where it's like, oh my
Yeah,
God,
they
this
end
is
up
useless.
joining them in the middle.
Yeah.
And they'll do it any way they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a serrated knife, and sometimes I'm
Like
separate.
a big bread knife that you go down between
exactly.
the two.
And that's what I have to
Yeah.
deal with.
I see a lot of times when you cut those apart, they come back and glue them back together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're almost better just cut the whole thing out and put it back
And
in
start
there.
again.
And at least it has wax on the beginning, and maybe they'll build it right the second time.
I agree. It's hard to write one that they've completely wonked out.
Yes.
And I'm not sure why. Might be because once they do it, that's their memory for how to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you though. That
Yeah.
once it's crooked, it will always be crooked, and you're just better to cut bait and cut the thing out.
And just like in, I use a Emery shim off season, so I'm not crowding things to put in patties or fondant or whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's always the case that gets filled with all this burr. Just
Yeah, they'll
crazy.
build burr cone.
They'll fill it because it's this extra space.
Yeah.
And they figure like we need to fill this with stuff. Yeah.
That's neat, isn't it, that they
Yeah.
do that? I mean, it's universal that way.
And it happens unbelievably quickly.
So what kind of equipment did you buy?
So I bought
Basic-
Brushy Mountain.
Did you buy their
I buy
full bee suit or what?
No.
did you-
I didn't buy any kits. I bought pretty much everything a la carte.
Yeah.
Because when you do the math, you don't necessarily get what you want in their kit. It might not be of the quality or the specs that you want, or to save $2, it might not be worth it for you.
This goes back to what you said earlier. Some people just want to pay one price and get it all, and other people
Yeah.
are, I don't need this thing, so I'm not buying a full
Yeah.
kit that comes with wood chips and things like that.
Yeah,
right?
it's like exactly.
So you're right. It's all in the eye of the beholder.
So for me, being a catalog maven like you are, I really a la carted everything like I wanted. So I found that I preferred a tool from another company, and so I wouldn't get their tool.
I think that's pretty common that you might find one company that you have an affinity for, but I just bought a nuke feeder. I was looking at the various ones. Brushy, which is, again,
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah.
They have a plastic one. I have no use for that. I'm not going to buy that, right?
Yeah.
I saw the one from Kelly, and I bought that one. And what I thought is I'd buy it and look at the design and see if I could make it on my own, because I too have a wood shop.
Right.
But after looking at the thing, it's beautiful. I'm like, well, I told my wife, I'm going to have to buy a couple of these.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
can't make it for what they
Right.
sold it to me. It's got nice handholds. It's a craftsman design kind of thing almost.
And
right?
that's
And
that in
so,
a nutshell is what I like. I
so
like
you
the,
absolutely do look around and go, this one suits my need. We're very like that in that manner.
So in taking that Rutgers course, Bob and Tim brought in all kinds of frames, all kinds of foundations, all kinds of feeders, all kinds of gadgets, the excluders and the reducers and the landing strips and the whatever. And they would give, and often they were at odds with each other, but they would give the pros and cons for what they liked and didn't like. And I took notes. And
Tim would always tell you, this is what it does, and some people use them, and I don't.
Yeah.
Because it's too much trouble because I manage it. And Bob would always be, this is a joke, you don't need this.
Right,
you don't need this.
right.
I bought a lot of things that Bob thought they were junk, and like the frame hangers.
Yeah.
You have one of those,
Yeah,
if I
yeah,
remember.
I do.
I think that thing's invaluable.
Yeah.
Bob used no use for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So to each his own, I suppose, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Brushy Mountain was the lion's share of the equipment in terms of boxes. And they have maybe commercial, middle of the road, and select. I usually went for select. And then I painted them with a Benjamin Moore primer, an exterior primer. And then I got Cypress when I could from Kelly. Got a stainless steel mouse excluder with holes. I got some reducers, got some Emery shims, got screened bottom boards, which I have to date not deployed because I go back and forth, and I've decided I don't think they're for me, even though some people rave about.
I've been
screened bottom
switching them
boards.
seasons,
Yeah.
and I think I'm this close to just saying I'm going to leave the solids in, and
Yeah,
I
I've
don't
only
know.
done
I haven't
solids.
figured that out yet.
Yeah, I've only done solids, and if you're committed to doing an alcohol wash, I'm not convinced that the sticky board approach to a screen it's probably not the best way to get a grip on your Varroa population anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, so, and then I recently got some nukes from Brushy Mountain. So I'm getting 2 more. So we're now going from 2 to 4.
Yep, double in your row.
And I have 3 stands. So I've got to excavate and add a 4th stand. I'll be doing that in the next 2 weeks. So they'll still be in line facing south with good exposure.
Are you going to tackle splits this year, or are you going to buy
I just
2
did
more
one.
nukes? You did?
I just
okay,
did.
Good.
After our last meeting,
Yeah.
I have what I think are pretty strong surviving colonies, and one is significantly visually stronger than the other. So I took a chance, not wanting to do too many things that, you sort of want to calculate your risk. So I took the stronger of the 2 and I split it.
Yeah.
And after we spoke at the meeting, I now have 3 deeps on the stronger colony on the right.
Yep.
And I checkerboarded and I moved things around to preserve the dome.
Yeah.
And moved up some brood, so it's brood and honey and pollen, and then I put in other frames. I moved up a couple frames with drawn comb, but I don't have the luxury, being my first year, to have a lot of that. So you put in foundation.
That's where you're at, right? Is you need to
you got to build that
just
stuff.
keep building. It takes like 3 years to get built comb where you have access. Laying
Yeah.
around and,
But just for the sake of the audience, I came to you for advice at the last meeting. I had 30 or 40 pounds of honey left. And my theory is that mild winters might be more challenging on bees than hard winters.
Yeah.
It's a little counterintuitive, but I'm developing a theory that won't be the case because of the confusion and because of the feeding, but not necessarily having enough warm days to go in and look for fear of chilling the brood, etc.
let me tell you something Bob Kloss just said at our exec meeting, and I've heard him say this before too, is that he weighs his hives. He has a scale.
Right.
Every year, doesn't matter whether it's cold or hot in the wintertime, his scales drop the same amount. And he checked with John Gott, who also does instrumentation of his hives, and they're seeing the same thing. And people are thinking because it's warm, the bees are eating all their stuff. His assertion is that that's not true. They only eat 1.5 pounds. They've been dropping 1.5 pounds each week until they get to like April 15th, and then they reverse and start to go back up. And the interesting thing about what he said is that he thinks 60 pounds is the right amount, right? The Merrick Guide and other resources will tell you 60 pounds going into winter.
Right.
And he said if you do the math, they'll eat through half of it, and then they tend to be comfortable with 30 pounds in reserve. When they get lower than that, they get a little antsy or a little nervous. So 60 pounds to him was the right number, and he's been weighing his hives for a couple of years now, and so is John, and they're both saying the same thing.
And you're saying coming out into April,
You think about
might
from
have
like
30
this
pounds.
January to April 15th, they're dropping 1.5 pounds every week. And then in April 15th, when the trees bloom and go crazy, then it just starts to reverse and they start putting on weight.
Fascinating. Because that's about what I had left in honey in both hives.
Yes, and that's what,
And
well,
I was,
actually,
I was brainwashed by, you're going to run out of food, you got to put in more honey. And my experience this first year was half of what I put in is reserve.
well, he starts seeing also, and you have to take into consideration that you go from a winter cluster to a full-blown box full of bees. They're adding on bees too, which also makes it give weight. So usually sometime around the first week of April, I don't want to equate this. He showed us this last December when we did the meeting up in Belvedere's. He starts to show where they add on weight, and it's not the nectar flow, but it's the addition of bees and some nectar being out there with skunk cabbage and some of the early spring plants that are available. So it's pretty interesting finding. Chat with him next time.
Yeah. Because as you know, I've been working with you to do some research on monitoring systems, and I can't wait to put in my own monitoring system just so I can get a better grip of all this kind of stuff, because coming through the first winter, and albeit a relatively mild winter, you enter the black hole, you go like, oh God, I'm going to throw some fondant in, I'm going to tuck them in, I'm going to have a vent hole at the top and a feeding, and you go like, I don't know what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I would love to have some, just because of the way
That's
I
a great
am.
observation of a first year beekeeper is you put them in fall,
You
and
hold your
you
breath.
come out the other side and wait. And I know people who just are besides themselves fretting.
Yeah.
And by the way, it doesn't change. I
I'm
do the
sure,
same.
yeah.
I stare out my window and look at my hives, and I just go, boy, I hope they're doing okay.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, I occasionally walk outside and look at them, but
I walk out there almost every day, no matter what the weather,
Yeah.
just to observe. I don't knock, I don't tap, I don't poke, I don't, but just to sort of get a vibe for what's going on. It's really sunny today. Are there dead bodies accumulating, or is it pretty clean in there through the holes of the mouse excluder, et cetera? But yeah, I feel like we're entering the black hole from the cold weather to the spring. It's like, I'd love to know more than that.
So what did you think of your summer experience, right? You got your bees established, they started to grow. I came over and talked to you about feeding at one point, I think.
Yeah, you came over at one point when I was concerned about, I didn't know the difference between an orientation flight and robbing.
Right.
So I kept going like, oh my God, I'm being robbed. It's like, no, we're hatching. This is brood hatching, and it's 2:30 in the afternoon, and there's some craziness out front because they're learning how to fly. They're 3 days old, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've learned a lot.
You see that afternoon, vroom, and now they're all out and doing
Yeah,
whatever. when
and they're doing
gets
it
that
now.
warm.
The last couple.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Although this morning it was 27 degrees. So
Yeah.
I'm waiting for next weekend when
Next
we
week,
do
yeah.
we have a bee meeting coming up
Right.
where we're going to install.
Right.
It's supposed to be 65 degrees. And finally, I think we're going to.
Is this at the mentoring hives? Or?
At the mentoring hives.
Do I know that? Maybe it's not in my book.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be there.
Now you do.
Yeah, the 16th or something, or.
Yeah, the 16th is the day.
Oh, I do know that. I'm
and
gonna
then
be,
the 23rd, the following week
23rd,
is
I know,
the state meeting.
Yeah, the 16th, I'm going to be in Atlanta for
Okay.
a coffee meeting. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Darn, I'm going to miss that.
We're gonna put up. We're gonna use the jib and put up a swarm trap in that meeting.
Oh,
also.
neat. That's another thing I wanted to do this year, but I'm not getting to it. Is to put up. You see the warm weather coming, and you go, "Oh man, they're going to swarm." What's my strategy for
Yeah.
preempting swarming? Hang some stuff.
You
in
hear
trees
us all
and-
talking about it, so now that's got to be swimming around
Oh
in the back
yeah,
of your mind.
yeah. So I keep every once in a while I'll call Jeannie and I'll say, "You home? Can you take a look? Like, do we still have bees?"
Yeah.
It's crazy, but whatever. So
What's-
last year when you came over, we ran into some problems, and this was beekeeping 101. So the day, May 17th, the day I brought home 2 nukes and installed them he actually installed them. I brought empty deeps and he installed them.
Did you go to his house?
I went to his house.
Yeah.
He and his father were there with boxes all over their lawn, and you had an appointment with a 15-minute window, and it was production. He was just knocking it out.
He has a large apiary right near me. And, typically what he does is makes his splits right there in the apiary.
Yeah.
And then you drive by, and every spring I look, and there's 50 nukes running across the field. It's right about now when the mustards are coming out in the fields and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
really neat. And you think, I'll say this for the listeners, May seems an odd time, right? A lot of people want their bees back in April.
Yeah.
But he makes the splits, and then he leaves them out, and he's got them, I don't know if he's feeding them or what he's doing, but they're on full forage, right?
Right.
And by the time you get them, they are bursting. They're bee bombs when you guys got them. Because I've seen George's nukes come
Oh, they were
out. I've
incredibly
purchased some in
active.
the past.
Yeah.
They're full 5 or 4 frames, whatever you're
Yeah,
getting.
yeah. And he might vary year by year. I think our year was 4. So I bring them home, set them into my apiary that I just described, and I'm sitting there all excited, and all of a sudden I see a marked queen dead being hauled out to the front landing.
Ooh.
And I'm going like, wait a minute, my idea of a nuke was that they're an integrated family, like Leave It to Beaver. Everybody's happy, one happy family, and like they would have already rejected the queen. So anyway, I called him, I went back, we started all over again, So that was my first experience losing a queen the first day.
That's pretty unusual. The fact that
Yeah.
you saw it was even more unusual.
Yeah, it was. They literally hauled her right to the front, and I guess I was there at the right time before they ditched her or flew her off or whatever. And I was really clearly upset. And he said, "Oh yeah, come on back," and he took care of it. And it made me wonder, in retrospect, like, I guess everybody has different ways of doing nukes, and the queens are introduced in different ways at different times. And this did not comport with my understanding of what a nuke was in terms of having a pretty well integrated queen with the family, because all of a sudden I get home after a car ride, and for whatever reason they decided they were going to kill the queen, and they killed her.
There's different ways to go about making a nuke, right? You
Sure.
can pull the queen out that's marked and it does become the family, or you can pull the frames out and give it a queen, and depending on how
And he did the latter.
Yeah,
And
depending
that
on how
explains,
that
I
goes.
think, probably the rejection.
I
Maybe.
think it's a really small rejection rate when that happens, because
Yeah.
if you're taking a laying queen out of a hive and you're putting her in something, typically if she's a laying queen, they'll pick up on her sense and they'll accept her. Now, if she was sitting on a table for a week or whatever and hasn't been laying from the time she got shipped and some of that, then you run into the risk of her needing to be accepted and
That-
worked into
right, that
to the
integration
colony.
piece. Right. So then that was my first introduction into beekeeping, and then everything's going along well.
I remember you were feeding that
Yeah.
colony on our advice.
Yeah.
And it was really packed. And
Yeah.
I had said to you, you need to back off a little
Yeah,
bit.
we were actually having
because-
backfill issues
yeah,
where.
they were backfilling into the brood. And
Right. So we were actually confiscating too much real estate for the queen and at risk for swarming,
yeah.
which again was a great learning experience. I didn't know. I went like, feed? Okay, feed. I'm going to feed them. And I fed them too much. And then I started cutting back on the feed to, I think I was measuring it maybe a quart every 3 days instead of just filling up those Brushy Mountain
Yeah,
troughs.
the big
The big guys, yeah. And everything worked out well. But then I lost the queen on the hive on the right. That was the hive on the left.
Yeah.
So the hive on the right, I went through, and this was a great lesson in understanding gestation and the entomology of the queen. I went through an entire procedure, observing,
Yeah.
and thankfully, and I can't recommend this enough to our listeners, I can't recommend enough keeping a logbook, even though it might sound mundane. I write down everything that I do, and again, following your advice, I don't go in there and do anything unless I have a reason to do something. So I literally, if you look at my logbook, at the end of my last session, I'll go like, what are the things I want to do next, and what am I thinking about? Then I'll do a brain dump and regurgitate everything that I did. I don't go as far as you do, and I probably should, where I think you record and video all your actions.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, which I probably should do. I'm at risk for forgetting stuff. So I write down everything, because that
Sometimes
becomes...
it's good to forget.
Yeah, that's
To
true.
go the other direction,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
overthinking it.
Yeah. And then when I go in, I only go in with a mission, but
What is your logbook, literally? You use a computer-based logbook?
no,
You're using
it's analog, old school.
Yeah.
They're sewn notebooks,
yeah, notebooks. Okay.
literally page after page after page.
Yeah.
Nothing fancy, but they're
Interesting.
Yeah, they're sewn notebooks.
All freeform, no forms.
No,
You're
no
not doing-
forms.
Okay.
Yeah. But I always open it with the date, the time, the relative humidity, the wind, the temperature, and then I have a temperature wireless temperature sensor on the middle staging box
Yeah.
that the sun hits, so I get the actual sun temperature as opposed to the ambient temperature.
Yeah.
So I record a lot of that stuff and what the cloud condition is like, and is it raining, was it raining, I try to give a forecast so we kind of can recreate what the conditions were, because that becomes important. For example, if you're going through procedure and you need to know, well, did the queen have an opportunity to go out
and
to the
fly.
DCA and
Yeah.
fly, etc. So I learned a fair bit that I didn't know for the first time about the life cycle of a queen, because I was so wanting to go in and go like, there's no sign of a queen, there's no brood, there's no eggs, there's no, what's going on? It's like,
What was your sense of how long it took her to get mated? Did you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was 16 to 21 days, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember.
I think a lot of people underestimate that, right? It takes 16 days to make a queen, and then it takes a period of time for her to be scurrying around the hive. Then she flies out, and then she comes back and practices. And
so it could be 30 days.
yeah,
I think
it could be 30 days
Yes.
before you start seeing her lay. And a lot of people get nervous. Oh, my queen's not working.
And that's
whatever.
when you can really screw up, because if they're trying to set up shop there, you don't want to go in and tear the house apart.
Yes.
And that's a lesson I learned.
And they're
'cause
trying to get acclimated to her and other things too, right?
Yep.
You're in there
Yep.
poking around.
And I
That's
was
the time
poking
you
around
really
too
need
much.
to leave her alone.
Yeah. And then Barbara Hill came over and said, you know what? Stop. She looked at my logbook and said, leave him alone.
Yeah.
She said, you need to wait. We did a timeline, and she said, you need to wait 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
You can't go in there, because now everything's happening. And then she said, I'm coming back in 10 days. And we rejoiced, because
Yeah.
everything was working. There was a
That's
new
cool,
queen.
isn't it? When you open it and you're like, oh, good, things are settled. I'm in a good
Yeah,
shape.
yeah. You see eggs, you see larvae, you see brood, you see everything.
Yeah. So I was going to ask
So
you.
you lose
what,
an entire month when everybody's talking about, oh my gosh, we're harvesting.
I remember
honey.
having this conversation with you about losing
Yeah.
that month and
You lose a month.
what would the impact be, and would you be able to overwinter? And
Yeah, exactly. And then when you lose that month, forgetting about honey production, you start remembering from Randy Oliver in the charts that before, and this was July.
yeah,
It was
It
July.
was late for you. I
July
remember.
going into
We were
August.
in the dearth.
Yeah, we were in the dearth, and you start remembering that chart when the population's going down of the bees, but the varroa are going up, and I'm going, oh my God. So like, am I going to do mite-away quick strips? Am I going to do apivar? And then remember, the one hive on the left was healthy. The one hive on the right was so new, I didn't want to do any treatment. So I waited, and because of mite-away quick strip, you have to have a 10-day window for
Yeah.
the temperatures had to be perfect.
You got to have the
And-
temperatures right. I'm glad you picked that up, right?
Yeah.
Because so many people had trouble with Mite-Away or Max.
Oh,
That they just, you have to find that temperature range that doesn't gas the bees. And the first 2 days are the most
Oh,
important.
yeah. Well, what I did was I took some liberties. I refrigerated it to mitigate the vapor
Yeah.
on the install, and I installed at night. Well, at night, probably like at 5 o'clock towards the
Yeah,
end
the
of the
afternoon
day.
is when you're supposed to put it in. That's-
Yeah. So,
So it's
between
not
that,
that
and it being
super hot.
right, and I figured any vapor effect will be mitigated by virtue of my
That's a
having
really good
refrigerated
tip.
it.
That was a great.
And I didn't know if I destroyed the efficacy of the drug by refrigerating. I had no idea, but it worked really well.
No, I don't think it. I don't. Knowing what I know about that, I've heard Tim say that. I believe.
Okay, okay.
I think that was a tip he gave at a state meeting down at Stockton State College.
Oh, okay.
And I do remember him saying install it in the afternoon.
Okay.
I hope I'm not making that up, but I think I remember that.
So I did the mite-away on the hive on the left. That was requeened the first day, but healthy. I didn't do mite-away on that, but then I did apivar to both of them towards the end of the season. And never did an alcohol wash. Felt like I just didn't have the time to do it because I felt like things were kind of volatile.
Yeah.
Never did the alcohol wash, but basically went like, I need to treat. I just know that there's no reason that my hives aren't going to be like everyone else's. I know we're going to have a population, and I know I need to deal with them.
I
Now I'm
checked-
going to be doing
I
alcohols.
checked my hives and know that I did an alcohol wash on 2 of the ones that I had, and my mite levels were right at the threshold, and I'll be damned if I was going to lose my bees, so I did treat with apivar. I gave them a short treatment in the fall, but you and I live 10 miles apart as the crow
Yeah.
flies.
Yeah.
We didn't have a good fall last year.
No,
the
no.
goldenrod wasn't very good. Everything was dry. Did you feed?
It
in
was
the fall?
really spotty. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I
How
fed
late
it
did you feed?
until late October, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. I
Yeah.
think I fed till Halloween.
Yeah. I think I went to
And then
the
it
first
turned
week
cool
in
the
November.
first week in November.
Yeah, I went to the first week in November, then I stopped. Then,
But I knew I had enough food on my hives that feeding them any further in November wasn't going to make any sense. And they're heavy coming out of winter.
Yeah,
You had
and
the same?
Yeah, I had the same experience. I had so much honey.
Yeah.
And I felt like I'll put fondant on as an insurance policy the first warm day I get when it's really cold. And I did that, and I replaced it a couple times. And then I came in with patties a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I
did too.
The bee,
They eat it all already?
yeah. Even with the honey there, and I'm not sure I understand how that works. Maybe it's less work to eat what's right there and not have to fly, or I heard conflicting
I put
stories.
A block of sugar and I put pollen. They didn't really need the block of sugar, but I figured again, like you,
Yeah.
I'm trying to build a huge workforce because I want to do splits. I didn't split mine yet.
Yep.
But yeah, they ate all your stuff already, right?
Yeah.
I know mine got
Yeah.
consumed.
Yep, they did. They were pretty voracious.
I
Those patties, the mighty, what is it called with the bee? Mega bee?
there's Magabee. There's a bunch of different
It's a
Ultra
date
Bee.
one. It's one of the ones that Randy
Yeah.
Oliver
There's a number of them.
liked. Yeah. So, in a nutshell, the first year was an incredible learning experience. And you'll probably get a totally different story if you ask my wife.
Yeah.
You know, because like just my moods and my emotionality and everything is like you could read the well-being or not of my beehives based on my mood, because I took it so seriously.
That's what happens with beekeepers, right? If you're in a challenge, I know there's times when I go in and I come back and I'm just so frustrated and ready to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I'm with you. It's one of those things like, man, if I could just figure this out, it's
Yeah,
a big puzzle, you know?
It is.
It's fun though, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm enjoying it so much.
Yeah.
And I have a book or two out on my nightstand, and I've got the magazines out, and you know, I might agree or disagree with something, and then I'll research something that I disagree with to see if I'm ready to change my mind. Or then
What
I'll
was
talk
your biggest aha moment of the year? I mean, it sounds, we already talked about several of them.
The
But
biggest moment of the year for my first year last
as a
year.
new beekeeper, what was the thing that
To
surprised
watch,
you the most?
to successfully go through a soup procedure was amazing.
Yeah.
To see that they can take care of themselves. To see that if left alone, but monitored, that they can lose a queen, but grow a queen. All within the complexity of this multi-organism. It's unbelievable.
What do you, how often do you inspect your hives now? What would you say this year you're going to do? How often will you be in them?
Yeah.
And is it more than when you started?
It'll
than
be
when you
less.
started?
It'll be less than when I started,
Yeah.
for sure. But let's talk about what I do when I inspect. Often every morning, or when I come home in the afternoon, I've got a little chair. I'll sit in front of the hives and just watch them.
Yeah.
And
I
just
do
see
too.
who's coming, who's going, what's on their legs, if anything.
What color is the pollen?
What color's the pollen, and then we'll take a walk and try to identify what it is they're eating, because we've got wilderness all surrounding us where I know they're foraging. So I'll do that just to get a vibe for like, are they doing well? Is there a lot of population? Is there not much population? Did it just rain? I sometimes put those white plastic covers that are otherwise useless, those thermal, I'll put that on the ground so I can watch the dead bees, and then I'll go like, this is about right, or wow, there's too many, it looks like there's too many bodies going. And then probably every week to 10 days, if I have a reason, I'll go in and look for evidence of queen rightness.
Yes.
I'm not going to look for a queen. Those days are gone. I was doing that maniacally the first year because it was so exciting.
Yeah. Are your queens marked?
Am I queen smart?
Marked.
Oh, marked. One is, and of course the superseded one's
Yeah.
not. And whether I'll mark her last year's blue color or not, I don't know. I'm inclined to let her be.
Yeah.
And just use my eyes to determine.
You have your notes, so you know when she came to.
Oh, I know, yeah, exactly. I can reverse engineer her birth date and all that stuff. Yeah, within a day or two.
The one thing about marking your queen, though, is if they change her, you'd be none the wiser.
I would never. That's a good
Right.
point. I would never know.
But
I probably
again,
should. I
what-
have one of
what
those
does
little
it-
capsules with the foam. I probably should.
Yeah.
I probably should do
Come
that.
to one of our meetings. We'll show you how to do it. It's really simple and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then the biggest thing is, I've got my favorite tools. I use a tool that no one around here uses. It's a tool I had somebody send me from London. It's like a J-hook with little steps. And instead of having to kind of mangle and lever and literally you take the end earlobes of each one and you put the tool in, if this is the end earlobe, you put the tool in underneath it and you just lift it up.
Yeah.
It's so simple and non-interventional, and you're at minimal risk for squishing.
Yeah.
So I've really become fond
I've
of
seen
that
those
tool.
J-hook tools.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
cool.
don't think I have one. I'll have to go look for that.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned it.
I'll bring it to you.
Yeah, let me know.
It's
which
a
one
really
you use.
nice tool. It's got a sharp beveled edge for scraping.
I tried a bunch of different tools. You know me.
Yeah.
I buy equipment, and I have a.
Well, you want to evaluate.
Well,
it.
for the podcast, I look at all this stuff, but some of the stuff I don't use regularly. But I have tried a bunch of different ones, and I've never tried one of those J tools. I have
Yeah.
a small little one.
Yeah, the little
It's
pocket
the
guy.
pocket one,
Yeah.
And I like that
Yeah.
thing, but my favorite is the Easy Pry.
Okay,
And they
now
don't
that's
pay
one I
me to
haven't
say
tried.
that.
Yeah.
I really like that one.
That's one I need to try. Yeah. And I have a Dayton smoker, I think, and our neighbors have white pine, so I'm using pine needles. And bee suit. I have a veil on a zippered jacket. I don't fully suit up. I usually duct tape my pants or throw my pants legs in my sock.
Yeah.
And I still get stung, but don't we all? I mean, if you say you don't get stung, you're probably not beekeeping.
You'll get stung.
Yeah.
Mostly
yeah.
in the fingers. Do you go gloveless? Or
Yeah, I try to go gloveless.
Yeah.
If I read their mood to be a little bit defensive, I'll put the gloves on. As
Yeah.
much as I hate the feel, you lose that tactile.
You do, absolutely.
Yeah. So I try to go gloveless. So I'm doubling from 2 to 4. I'm doing nukes again. This time, you know Carly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Carly did.
I had some nice talks with him. He's expensive, or he's more expensive than anyone else. But I'm trying his. I have 2 nukes coming from him, and I'll see what he does.
I've gotten bees
Yeah.
from him in the past. He's got Carniolan bees. and,
Yeah.
I like his stuff. I've used it.
Yeah. So I was convinced that he was just a thoughtful apiarist, and
He is. He's also local. I mean, he's in Hillsborough. He's doing all this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So that's pretty
and that was
close to
good
us.
because I'm trying to figure out a way to get away from, we're trucking up the bees from Georgia, we're trucking up the bees from Florida. It's like, you read those reports. I mean, there's something going on. I'm not sure they've got a grip on it. I've heard some theories about getting a grip on it, but a lot of the mass-produced queens trucking up from the south, there's some issues with them.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't make it through the year.
It's funny, though, is that I hear both sides, right?
Yeah, and the guy that came to one of our meetings,
Yeah.
I hear both sides.
The
as well.
apiarist, I don't want to mention names. I'll stay away from that.
Yeah, fair enough.
The queen producer and the package producer that spoke at our meeting
Right.
recently, you can go look on YouTube if
Yep.
you really want to know who it is.
Yep.
I was pretty impressed by his conversation, and I know who brought him up here and why. And I bought one of his packages last year,
Right.
and it did really well.
Okay.
And I'm buying 2 more this year.
It seemed like his
Because I'm
operation
going to
was
put
great.
them into non-conventional hives, and I can't put nukes in them, right? I'm going to do a ware hive this year, and
Right.
I'm going to put one in my top bar.
Right, okay.
And so I'm going to start with them. But the fact of the matter is, I have access to abundance of local queens, so somewhere along the line, I'm going to take their queens out and put my name
Right,
from
right.
local stock. That being said, Dave Tarpey, who talked
Right,
about
right.
queens and said that the commercial queens that he sampled anonymously were pretty good.
Right.
Didn't see problems with them. By all the measurements and metrics, the queens that he got performed admirably.
Right, the numbers of matings and the
Yeah.
right.
So from that respect, I don't know if there's, as you said before, there's all this lore out there. People love to share their commentary, and without the evidence of Randy Oliver or somebody, what do they really got other than notions that And a lot of times, for what it's worth, there's half. I believe this. Half the beekeeping community does it well, and the other half doesn't, and that means half of them can say things that don't make sense, right?
Yeah. I totally agree.
Maybe that ratio is wrong, but it's just illustratively, there's a lot of people out there who don't know what they're talking about. Right.
And I think that's the challenge. As a beginner, now it's getting a little bit better because as you build up a knowledge base based on scientific articles, you learn who to read and who to trust, and then you start understanding that certain people are just really strongly opinionated but have no scientific basis for what they're saying. And then you're a beekeeper when you start being able to separate the lore from evidence-based.
Well, so welcome to your second year.
Thank you.
I'm here
I'm
from
so excited.
2008, and I still feel like a novice at times.
I definitely
I do feel
like
I've gone through the trough of disillusionment, which Randy talks about, and I feel like I'm going up the other side. I've had enough exposure and information on this is that I feel like I have a good game plan. I wish you the same. I hope you
so
could
much.
get there quickly and stay with us. And
I'm having so much fun. And the organization, just a little bit of a pitch, and I know we didn't discuss this, but the chapter is like my lifeblood because there's so many practitioners and so many beekeepers that have been keeping for a long time, and they probably see it when I question them that I really need to know because I'm really trying to work through an issue. And it's great to hear. And, you ask 100 beekeepers a question, you get 150 answers, whatever. But that's okay when you learn how to assimilate what you're hearing.
That's what will
such a
happen
great
over,
chapter,
when you're as far along as I am. You'll be able to fairly evaluate that based on your practical experience. The more you're in your hives, the more you'll go, yes, I've seen that, that makes sense, or no, I don't quite agree with that, and okay, thanks for telling me that, whatever. But we have Bob, we have Joe, we have Stan, we have Roger, we have Barbara, and all these people who have been doing it for a period of time. And
been such a resource.
That's a great part of Northwest is, and even the state level, I get a chance to talk to people across the state being in a position I'm in, and, access to Tim Schuler for everybody. What a godsend in that respect. So,
I had a friend whose hives I'm beginning to take over for him in Hopewell, Bob Harris, who actually taught beekeeping at Princeton for years, but he travels a lot, and he lost 3 of his 4 hives last year. So I said, let's get Tim to do a post-mortem because we need to know if we got fouled. We need to know what's going on.
right.
Tim came over. I spent an hour with him last Wednesday, and it was so instructional. It was amazing.
Without a doubt, going through stuff with Tim every time. I've shot some videos for him and with him and worked alongside, and even gone to his house and seen his operation. And every time you have a chance to work with him, there's nobody that has their hands in more bees than Tim, I think, other than, obviously the commercial guys like Grant and so on. But, without a doubt, that is great. So what was I have this suggestion to you. You have Bob Harris, is his name?
Yeah, Bob Harris,
His location and your location. So if you make splits and whatever, and you guys can work together, I think that's the theme of 2016 for our association.
That's what we're doing.
Is find a buddy system, right?
Yeah, there's of the 6 or 8 that I mentioned in our area, there's 2, possibly 3 of us that we're comfortable with each other's practices, motivation, curiosity, whatever, that we're starting to share.
That networking is so important, and having the ability to make a split and take your nuke and put it over in their yard for a period of time.
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah. If somebody's out of town and it's time for Apivar, I'll go treat his, he'll treat mine, whatever.
That's great.
That makes it so much better. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. It's like just a little local group. Yeah.
So is there anything I didn't ask you about? About this that surprised you
No, it's just
We covered a lot of ground.
yeah. It's been so much. It
I have
continues
to
to be
ask
fun.
you about something. A little birdie whispered to me that you have a music background,
I do.
and it's not just a fancy music like a hobby. It's something a little deeper than that. So tell us.
Yeah. Yeah, I joined the music. I'm a musician. I'm classically trained from the age of 4, before I was 5, on cello. And I'm self-taught, and then I had lessons at the same time when I was 4 on guitar. And I joined the Musicians Union when I was 13. My parents used to
Wow.
drive me to jobs in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Gainful employment, where your parents would take you to all these clubs. I couldn't drink, obviously, and but I was in
Are
the
you from
union.
this area?
I'm from Philadelphia, yeah, the suburbs of Philly. And then I went to college, and then taught myself pedal steel guitar, which is the love of my music, and moved to Nashville. And was a studio musician and a road musician for maybe 15 or so years in Nashville, touring the world with people like Willie Nelson, George Jones, Johnny Rodriguez, Waylon Jennings. I played with everybody.
Yeah.
And I did staff work for the Grand Ole Opry, did all the TV shows like Hee Haw and Midnight Special, Don
So if
Kirshner's
I go
Rock.
back and watch old Eha and I find you,
Yeah,
in this?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of that on pedal steel guitar.
I had no idea. Somebody whispered to me that you had played with all these people.
Yeah, and we're sitting in Rojos,
Yeah.
which is Spanish for red. This all was red.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a nickname in 1973 that Willie Nelson gave me. He called me Rojo. That was red ponytail, red beard. Yeah. And then 1985, I moved back up north to be closer to my wife's parents and our parents as they aged. And I went to law school, and then I became an entertainment lawyer. And was an executive for 15 years or so at Sony Music in New York at the
How about
headquarters.
that? Yeah.
And I executive produced Bob Dylan. I worked with all kinds of people. And then I headed the advanced technology group and did secret work in the think tank for the Japanese think tank in Tokyo. I've got 8 patents to my name in music technology. So yeah, I've been in music my whole life. I'm a musician. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what is this? Your retirement gig here, or this coffee thing?
I don't want to retire. I love what I do. So in 2005, when I left Sony, they merged with Bertelsmann in a joint venture, and I asked to leave. I wasn't liking the music industry. It was getting what I call toxic. So I was looking for my next career, and I have a background in organic chemistry. I love to tinker. I love industrial design. So I rebuilt that 1956 German roaster, very, very rare roaster. And we use it every day. I mean, that's a working machine.
I'll have to take a shot and put it in the
Yeah.
podcast blog so that people can see. We'll shoot some candidates around here of your setup.
And I jokingly say that the reason I built Rojos 11 years ago was so I could own a forklift. So
Yeah.
you see the forklift
I do
sitting
see
over
the
there.
forklift, yeah.
Because we're bringing in thousands of pounds of coffee every couple of weeks to roast and to send out to our accounts. So, yeah, it was my next career. I was 55 then. So I have no interest in stopping what I'm doing. I love what I do.
There's another location in Princeton too, which I didn't know till yesterday when we chatted.
In Palmer Square, right next to the Bent Spoon,
Yeah.
in the historic part of Princeton, across from University. We've been there almost 3 years.
Are you here like 7 days a week?
5 to 6 days a week
Yeah.
when I'm not traveling. Like I do what's called origin trips, where I'm doing coffee research or looking for new farms to play with, or looking for ways to improve agricultural processes with the coffee farmers to improve the taste. I have a certified palate. I'm called a Q grader. There's a relatively small handful of us in the world that have that level of palates. So I work with my
that's
palate.
interesting, and-
Yeah.
So are you a foodie too?
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. I love working with chefs that have a good
If you
palate.
do a lot of traveling or whatever, listen to Gastropod. That's my latest
Oh, cool.
podcast. it's a foodie podcast, and it's interesting. They talk about microbes of the soil, and it improves the food
Yeah.
and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Be
Yeah.
right up your alley.
Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah.
I'm always looking at soil type. The terroir that everybody talks about in wine, it has everything to do with the terroir in coffee growing. Yeah.
So this year you're going to get some honey,
Yeah, I
and
can't
then
wait.
you'll be able to figure that out.
Yeah, I can't wait. I got some equipment last year in anticipation, just like an extractor and
Yeah.
some stainless containers.
Nice.
And the question is, to what extent will the foundationless frames be strong enough to not have to crush and strain?
You'll have to figure
We'll
that
see.
out. That's why
Yeah.
Roger put those dowels in so that he can
Yeah,
spin.
myself the same.
Yeah.
So they seem pretty strong, as long as I don't spin too quickly,
Yeah.
and we'll see.
I'm aligned with you, especially lately. There's been some conversation about how much Coumaphos and fluvalinate's been in foundation, and I think I need to get out of the foundation business. And also Bob Kloss, who I talk to all the time on the
Yeah, Bob's
podcast.
way into it, isn't he? Yeah.
Bob's really into foundationless, and his hives have been doing really well. And
Yeah.
I think it's just been a matter of, I tinkered with my hives too much that I lost the stability. And last year I went back to the typical recipe that you followed and talked about. And from now on, I'll be a little more conventional, but I'm going to build more hives. And then with my excess hives, I'll start to be more treatment-free and foundationless and all that other
Right.
stuff. But yeah, it's nice to get honey, and you'll appreciate that. And
I'm
maybe
excited,
you'll
yeah.
be bringing that back in here somewhere.
We probably have so many customers already asking me,
Yeah.
are you going to have your honey here at Rojo's? So, yeah.
Well, this has been awesome. I
Same
really
here, thank
appreciate.
you.
You know what we got to do is come back a year from now and talk about year 2 and see how.
Sure. I would love that.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you so much, Kevin. Yeah.
I also will say to you that maybe you'll take me out. I love coffee. I roast mine at home.
Yeah,
I'm
I
a complete
know,
utter
yeah.
novice, right? But maybe what we're going to do is come back and do an episode just on the coffee shop and talk about some of that stuff. Not beekeeping, and we'll make sure people know up front. And we'll come back and have a chat about that too,
Maybe-
because I'd love to hear about the
Maybe,
operation.
I mean,
and
we,
how it
we
works.
can have the big machine fired up, but maybe what we do is sample roast on our lab roaster
Yeah.
and go through a cupping,
That would
an
be
analytical
great.
tasting, something that I do almost every day anyway. And that's,
Okay.
That's how you,
I'm game.
yeah, good.
So-
So you're hereby officially invited to come back and do that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, thank you for this.
You're welcome.
Hope everybody enjoyed the podcast, and I'll do a little wrap up here afterwards. But I really appreciate you taking the time and
My
inviting
pleasure.
us into your place. And good luck on your bees.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed
Thanks so
helping
much.
you out.
Appreciate it. Thank you for all your help, and thank you for everything the chapter does
Yeah, my pleasure.
to help me as a beginner to understand.
There's so many people that help out from our organization. So yeah. All right. Good.